Okay, we are picking up today, I believe, with Passionate Shepherd to His Love on page 997 in the 11th edition, 1240 in the 10th edition. And then read the poem that I have linked in the syllabus on your own. It's a response to this, written at the same time. Nymph's reply to the shepherd. Passionate Shepherd to His Love is by Christopher Marlowe. The Nymph's reply is by Sir Walter Raleigh. Come live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasure prove. Those rhymed in Marlowe's Shakespeare's day. And we will all the pleasure prove that valleys, groves, hills, and fields, woods or steepy mountain yields. And we will sit upon the rocks, seeing the shepherds feed their flocks, by shallow rivers to whose falls melodious birds sing madrigals. And I will make thee beds of roses, and 1,000 fragrant posies, a cap of flowers, and a kirtle, embroidered all with leaves of myrtle, a gown made of the finest wool, which from our pretty lambs we pull, fair-lined slippers for the cold, with buckles of the purest gold, a belt of straw and ivy buds, with coral clasps and amber studs. And if these pleasures may thee move, come live with me and be my Louvre. The shepherd swain shall dance and sing for thy delight each May morning. If these delights thy mind may move, then live with me and be my Louvre. All of the appeals in this poem are pastoral. They're all from the natural world, outside, away from the city, away from civilization. Notice everything that the speaker is suggesting that the lover will receive are from the natural world, okay? Will prove the pleasure, valleys, groves, hills and fields, woods or steepy mountain. No cities, no towns, no courts, no monuments, no civilization. We'll sit on the rocks, see the shepherds feed their flocks. That's another pastoral image. By shallow rivers, we'll hear the birds sing. We won't hear choirs of people sing, okay? And I will make thee beds of roses and 1,000 fragrant posies. Beds of roses sounds absolutely wonderful, doesn't it? Rose petals. Only thing is, what do you have to go through to get the rose petals? Thorns. Read the response. I should have printed it out and forgot to. Read the response by Walter Raleigh. In nearly every image that Marlowe puts in here, Raleigh kind of gives, okay, this is an idealized pastoral world. It is perpetually late spring, early summer. The weather is wonderful. And what Raleigh does is he takes that idealized world and he reduces it to the real world. So what is going to happen with this idealized view of late spring, early summer? What happens to every late spring and early summer? Eventually, it becomes late summer, fall, winter. And so you're no longer going to be nice and warm, and the roses aren't going to be soft and fragrant, etc. Everything decays. And so what Raleigh does is he takes this poem, kind of like Shakespeare does with that anti-blazon thing that I talked about, and he turns it on its head. Okay? They're just playing a game. When Marlowe wrote this, Raleigh wasn't the only one that replied. John Donne, I don't think this poem is in here. John Donne wrote a response called The Bait. Yep, not in here. Which is kind of similar to Raleigh's. But there are probably a half dozen that I've seen responses to this poem. That was a common thing in the late 16th century, early 17th century. Somebody would write a poem, and then a bunch of that person's contemporaries and or friends would say, oh yeah, well let me, and they'd write a response, or they'd try to outdo what the original author did. Okay, so go from there to, excuse me, cannot shake this cold that I started last week. 768. 2 poems by William Blake. Thought I had it marked, but yeah, there it is. 2 poems by William Blake, late 18th, early 19th century poet, author, illustrator, engraver. The guy did an awful lot. He wrote a lot of poetry. 2 of his collections are called Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. Okay? He wrote the poems, he illustrated them himself. All right? The first poem we're doing, The Lamb, is from Songs of Innocence. Okay? This poem is often excerpted in books of poetry for children, like 100 best poems for children kind of thing. Robert Louis Stevenson did a child's treasury of verse late in the 19th century. This was one of the main poems in that child's treasury. Blake was he was a very eccentric individual. Had visions, out there kind of visions. One day he was either in his cottage or in a pub and said that he saw the forehead of God pressed up against the window, kind of out there. Okay, wrote a poem, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. He was the first person that kind of suggested that in John Milton's Paradise Lost, which is this big long poem written in 10 and then later revised to be 12 books. The Paradise Lost itself is about that long. Okay, it's massive. Well, there's a scene in it where Satan, down on the fiery lake, the lake of sulfur in hell, is allowed by God to rise. God kind of smiles at him. He lifts himself up off the lake, and he gives this rip-roaring, rousing speech to the fallen angels. Think, if you've ever seen Independence Day, the speech that the president gives standing on top of that F-15 or whatever it is. Think of, if you're familiar with Shakespeare's Henry V, Prince Hal St. Crispin's Day speech, which is one of the greatest rousing speeches of history. Think Winston Churchill in the House of Parliament right after Dunkirk, during the Blitz. We shall never fail. We shall never surrender. We shall fight them from the beaches. Blah, blah. Well, Satan gives that kind of speech. All right? It's just glorious. Blake argued that Milton gave Satan that speech because he was privately, meaning secretly, of Satan's party. That is, he secretly admired Satan. Many other critics since then have said Blake's entirely wrong about that. Milton's doing something else there, which he goes on and shows later in the poem. So, this is The Lamb, Songs of Innocence. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and bid thee feed by the stream and o'er the mead. Gave thee clothing of delight, softest clothing, woolly bright. Gave thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Little lamb, I'll tell thee. Little lamb, I'll tell thee. He is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. He is meek and he is mild. He became a little child. I a child and thou a lamb. We are called by his name. Little lamb, God bless thee. Little lamb, God bless thee. Okay? Who/what is the little lamb? Is it a literal lamb? Could be. What else could it be? Louder? Reader? A child? Okay. Little lamb, who made the lamb? Notice it's not, what were your parents? Okay? And so, whoever made the lamb gave it life, bid thee feed by the stream o'er the mead. Again, pastoral images. Why? Because that's where lambs belong, etc., etc. Made the lamb tender, soft, delightful. Okay? I'll tell you who made you. He's called by thy name. Now that's, a little bit more explicit. Behold the Lamb of God. John the Baptist says to his followers when Jesus approaches, who takes away the sins of the world. He calls himself a lamb. For he calls himself a lamb. He's meek, he is mild. He became a little child. I a child, thou a lamb. We are called, that is, we're all called by his name. Ideas, Christians. Pretty straightforward. Not, we could talk about it, go into a little bit more depth and symbolism and such. But then you look to the tiger. The tiger is found in songs of experience. So one of the questions to ask is, what is meant by innocence and what is meant by experience? The tiger. Notice the lamb, 1789. The tiger, 1794. Songs of Innocence were published first. Songs of Experience published later. And compare the kind of rhyme scheme and meter of the two poems. Little lamb who made thee, this I know who made thee, gave thee life, bid thee feed, by the stream and o'er the mead. It's kind of sing-song, right? Then you get the tiger. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night. What a mortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry. In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? The hand talking about, and the feet, the meter. Bum, 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 accented, unaccented syllable. Okay? What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp, dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? So let's stop there. So, lamb, tiger. What do tigers do with lambs? Eat them if they have the opportunity, okay? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night. Why is the tiger described at nighttime? What's a metaphorical, not a literal, a metaphorical or figurative or symbolic difference between daylight and nighttime? Can't see as well. It's dark. Things are hidden. When are you, quote unquote, more at danger in a city? At night. Things are hiding in the shadows and such. Okay? So in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? How is a tiger symmetrical? How are we symmetrical? Take a line, go from the top of your head, and go down the middle. Right, left, same, 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 same. We have this symmetry, okay? But this is what? A fearful symmetry. How is the tiger not being described? It's not all innocent, soft, and cuddly. Are tigers naturally evil? Is what a tiger does if it catches something evil? No. Is a cat catching a mouse being evil? No. It's a cat doing what a cat does. Okay? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? Meaning, where did the one who made you, get the light that kind of fills a tiger's eye. I should have brought it in today. I've got a ring. It's made out of tiger's eye. And if you've ever seen what tiger's eye stone looks like, it's got dark and dark, and then it's got a light spot in it. It looks like a cat's eye, dark and then the slit, or light and then the slit, either of the two. What was the source of the light of the tiger's eye, is the speaker is asking. On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? What is the poet probably alluding to? Anybody know? Anybody know any Greek mythology? Prometheus. Prometheus was a guy who seized fire from the gods. And because he seized fire from the gods, they got angry. So they chained him to a rock. And for all eternity, an eagle comes and rips his liver out. It grows back, the eagle comes back. For all eternity. Okay? On what wings dare he aspire? That's not Prometheus. It's Daedalus. Daedalus and his father made wings of wax and feathers. They fly up. His father says, don't fly too high. You'll get too close to the sun. The wax will melt. Daedalus is like, nah. He keeps flying. Wax melts. Feathers, and he crashes and burns. What are those both images of? Men doing things they ought not to do, or attempting things they ought not to attempt. Why? What's the implication in both those myths? Something I would argue, you don't have to agree, that some of our scientists today should probably pay a little more heed to. Okay? Something that Robert Oppenheimer kind of alluded to after they did the first explosion of the first nuclear weapon in New Mexico in 1944. He saw that explosion and he said, I am become, I think it is Shiva, destroyer of worlds. He realized as soon as boom, oops, can't put that genie back in the bottle. These are all images of human over-grasping. Okay? In what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? Shoulder means kind of brute force, pushing into something, but it's more than just brute force. There is also an artistic ability. Okay? To do what? To create the tiger's heart. And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? That could refer to breathing, creating the beat, what gave you life. Okay? Blake, by the way, if I remember correctly, friends of Percy Bysshe Shelley. Anybody know who Shelley was married to? Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, who wrote the novel Frankenstein. Frankenstein's one of the things. It's about many things. One of the things it's all about is scientists going too far. Dr. Frankenstein wants to do what? He wants to be like God. He wants to create something. Okay? What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? Like a forge. What forged the, animating power of the tiger? What the anvil, what dread grasp does its deadly terrors clasp? What dread grasp? What does the thing that made you hold within its hands. When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears. What is that referencing? It's not just there because it sounds cool. It does sound cool, but there's more to it. Revolt in heaven? According to traditional Christian doctrine of all kind of varieties, when the satanic rebellion occurred, and bear in mind, the name Satan, it doesn't mean, oh, the great evil one. It just means adversary, opponent, enemy, okay? When the satanic rebellion occurred, a third of the angels of heaven followed Satan, okay? So, when the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, that implication is, I think, could be entirely wrong, the crying, the sighing of the fallen angels. Why? Because they can no longer go back. And did he smile, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the Lamb make thee? And that suddenly makes it take on this whole kind of other, possibly at least, theological or religious context. Did the one that made the Lamb, and bear in mind the Lamb is what? He is meek, he is mild, he became a little child. Did the one who made the Lamb, the Son is the only begotten of the Father, Christian theology, did he who make the Lamb make thee? What was Satan, the adversary, in the hierarchy of created stuff? The pinnacle. Satan was the top of the angelic order. It's like Michael was, or Gabriel, one of the two, just beneath. Satan was called the son of the morning star. The morning star, that's Christ. So, not literally right next. Why? Because God is not made in traditional theology. God is self-existent. Everything else exists because God created it. Did he smile his work to see? The implication of that is once he made you, fashioned you, gave you breath, gave you life, that heart's beating, did he go, oh, that's pretty cool, well done? Or the implication is, did he realize this one's going to rebel? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what a mortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Notice the first stanza, what a mortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry. The last stanza is all the same, except for dare frame thy fearful symmetry. So the first one's asking, what could have made you? And the second one's saying, why, almost more, why did he? The dare. Who has the gumption, the whatever, to dare do this? What's the implication? Again, is this on the surface level of the poem, what I'm about to say? No, it's not. You got to read deep, and you have to read wide in order to get these implications. You know, there's a book out. One of my kids had a high school teacher assign it. Something like how to read like a literature professor. It's a stupid idea. It's a little book. It's like 100 pages. Why? Why is it a stupid idea to have a book like that designed for high school students? Or maybe college students? How do you get to quote unquote read the way I read? What's the difference between me and you? A very obvious one. Age. And with age, experience. That is, I've been reading this stuff and a whole bunch of other stuff for an awful long time. You don't see those connections until you do read other things. And you go, wait. And once you realize that, Blake read a lot of those other things. Very well read Christian theology, very well read Greek mythology. He wrote a poem about Prometheus, etc. Okay? Innocence experience. What might be another word for experience? And I think, no, we're not reading it because I think it's no longer in the book. Used to be another poem that I did by Blake called, just making sure, I don't think it is included anymore. Yep, called The Chimney Sweep. It's about a little boy who works in late 19th century, late 18th century, early 19th century, works as a chimney sweeper. This is before child labor laws. 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old children were regularly employed to do that. And employed is a not quite accurate term because many of these kids were homeless. So they were taken in, given basic minimal food and stuff, and they spent their days crawling up and down chimneys. They had brushes, but it was their bodies turning around inside the flues that would scrape the soot and creosote off. Okay? Most of them died before they reached 20 because of lung cancer and such. Anyways, that poem is part of the Songs of Experience. Why? Because the little kid doesn't get to experience ever any innocence. Most of these poems are described out in the beautiful, unspoiled, untouched country. In other words, this is like the Garden of Eden, and this is like just outside the Garden of Eden. You know, where the angel is now standing at the entrance to the gate with the flaming sword saying, no entrance. The only way you come back into the Garden of Eden is by going through the travail of this world, all that kind of stuff. Okay? Okay, go from there to the first one assigned for today, 758. My heart leaps up. Okay? William Wordsworth, contemporary of Blake's. Notice, he's born in 1770. Blake's Songs of Innocence, published in 1779. So he's young. Blake is go back there a second. Where was Blake? 768. Get his dates again. Blake lived 1757 to 1827. Okay, so in Wordsworth 1770 to 1850. By 1800, they knew of each other. Blake's an early romantic. Wordsworth is what's called kind of a mainstream, main romantic. Come on, throat. The romantics were those who looked or emphasized nature in their poem. Romantic has nothing to do with love. It was to look to the natural world for meaning or kind of a religious experience. You don't go to church to find God. You go out, where I'm from, you go out to the redwoods. If you've ever seen a redwood tree, go out to California. Go to the giant sequoia, go to Yosemite National Park, go to Santa Cruz Mountains, walk in the redwoods. Okay? Trees 300 feet tall, 2,000 years old. I mean, something that's been around. Oh, it is almost a religious experience. But it wasn't only that. It was also paying attention to the ordinary in life, the everyday things, paying attention to it and seeing and receiving meaning from that. Okay? Like a flower, a rock, a brook, a stream, a cloud. Think Ode to the West Wind. It's a big, long poem about the wind, about leaves, storms, tempests, etc. And what's the speaker say? Be thou, my meaning. Fill me, speak through me. But it's to the west wind. So, my heart leaps up. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. There it is. Also, an emphasis on childlike innocence, childlike wonder. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began, so it is now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. Wordsworth spent much of his time in what's called the Lake District of Northwest England. He spent time there with his best friend, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. They collaborated on poetry. They collaborated on a book that included kind of this literary theoretical part and then poems that demonstrated it. What's he saying in this poem? My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. What does that mean, my heart leaps up? Obviously, it's not literal. The heart doesn't go. So what's it mean? What experience do people often have when there is a gorgeous rainbow? Not one of these hazy, partial ones where you just see parts of it. But I mean a full or double rainbow. You kind of do what? It's that. It's that. So was it when my life began? That is, when I was a child and I saw a rainbow, I was full of amazement and wonder. So is it now I am a man? In other words, I have not lost that childlike wonder. So be it when I shall grow old. So let it be the same when I grow old, comma, or let me die. When? Let me die when? Not whenever. Now. Now, when I still feel my heart leap up when I see a rainbow. Let me die still with that sense of childlike innocence or wonder or the real meaning of the word awe. To be full of awe, to see something that is awesome, is something that takes your breath away. Something that, captures you. I think I've mentioned it here before. Growing up in California, earthquake's not a problem. Always wanted to see a tornado. Saw two of them in 2009. One of them, the big F4, that was literally 200 yards from my house. Don't need to see one ever again. That was awesome enough for one lifetime. Okay? And then was in an F1. The child is father of the man. Notice how he inverts what we think of as the normal process. How's the child father of the man? Everyone's a child first and becomes an adult. We grow out of, we are produced by that child first. And I could wish my days to be bound each to each. My days connected by what? Natural piety. Piety means religious kind of devotion. But this is a natural piety. This is a piety that says, just look at the beauty around. Okay? Wordsworth he would consider himself a Christian. He would not consider himself a doctrinal or doctrinaire. He would consider himself Christian in the sense that this didn't happen by wild, sheer chance. By 14, 16 billion years, whatever, in chance and just cosmic hiccup, so to speak. There is a design and an order, okay? He would say. So maybe not, Christian, maybe deist. Go from there to 780. And we get kind of not an extrapolation, what's the phrase I want? A continuation of some of the ideas from My Heart Leaps Up. But it's more negative. It's like the child who wrote, I'm not saying he was a child when he wrote it, but it's like the child who wrote My Heart Leaps Up has now become a man. This is very similar to God's Grandeur, all right, by Gerard Manley Hopkins. The world is too much with us. Just stop with that. The world is too much with us. What does that mean? Okay, this is written or published in 1807, almost 200 years ago. How much more would Wordsworth say the world is too much with us today as opposed to his day? Think of the things we have today that they did not have then. These. We are much more, quote unquote, connected. We know much more about what is going on literally around the world right now at every given moment. Or we can know. He's still talking when newspapers are relatively new. They're only about 100 years old by this time. Okay? Books, printed books, are only 300, 250 years old. 350 years old. The world is too much with us. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. The sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours, and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. It moves us not. Let's stop there. Why is the world too much with us? Well, it's kind of explained in the next half line and line. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. What are our powers? Our lives. Our life force. Okay? Our efforts. What energy we expend. Our energies would probably be a better word. What do we spend our energies doing? Getting and spending. Spending doesn't necessarily mean like monetary spending. It means getting stuff and then what? Using it up. Okay? Late and soon. Late, long ago, soon, just today. The implication is all our lives, from our youth till our age, we spend our time kind of buying and selling. We spend our time just eating stuff up, not literal eating, using, consuming. It's kind of why I said, imagine he were writing this today. Little we see in nature that is ours. That is, little do we see in nature that is kind of a reflection of us. Little do we see in nature that we are connected to. Every time there's a major storm, a major hurricane, a major tornado outburst, etc., how is it described in the press or in the news or in the media? It's like we, humans, are somehow separate from that. And it's Mother Nature's angry. Well, we are part of nature, are we not? We are natural. We often tend to think we're not, but we are. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. What's a boon? It's like a reward. It's like a bounty. We've given our hearts away for what? Stuff. What have we gotten in exchange? Notice, the heart was given, our desires, our longings, the things that fulfill us, kind of this religious experience. I don't mean necessarily a formal, organized religion, but a sense of belongingness, of belonging to something greater than just myself. We've given it away for what? That's the question. This sea that bears her bosom to the moon, right? Does the ocean ever cover itself? No, it doesn't. It's just there. The winds that will be howling at all hours. Why? They can't be controlled. And are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. What does it mean to be out of tune with everything? Remember the short poem, The Hook in the Eye, or The Eye in the Hook? And it's, you fit into me like a hook into an eye. And then when you get the next two lines, a fish hook, an open eye. Okay? How does the fish hook fit into an open eye? It doesn't. We are out of tune, meaning we, humans, aren't in what with nature? We're not in synchrony. We're not in harmony with nature. Maybe if the war is anywhere, it's where? It's on our part. Why? When I first started teaching at MTSU, fall of 1993, that year, that spring, the U.S. Midwest had horrible floods from snow runoff and heavy, heavy rains. Okay? Mississippi, way out of its banks. Okay? And one of the conclusions drawn from the floods was that most of it was our fault. Our being who? Anybody know specifically? Who kind of manages, controls, tries to direct rivers and things like that in the United States? The Army Corps of Engineers. Going back to the 1930s and the Great Depression and the Works Project Administration under Roosevelt, they tried to control how the Mississippi would flow. And the Mississippi decided, spring of 93, no, you puny little humans, you can't control how I flow. I'm going to flow where I want. Just like now, literally today, right now, as we talk. There's a huge area in the Central Valley of California called the San Joaquin Valley that is underwater. Why is it underwater? Because it used to be a lake about 150 years ago. called Lake Tulare. Now, that is prime agricultural real estate. And there are farms and there are houses, etc. But right now, it is all under, last time I read something, it was like 5 or 6 feet of water. Why? Because of all the rain California's been getting. So all the rain California's been getting is not because of global warming. This happens about every 30 to 50 years in California. Suddenly, it's like somebody turns the spigot on in the Pacific, and just storms just come. Last big time it happened was in 1983, winter of 82, 83. I was out there at the time. I mean, it's where I grew up, and we just had constant rain. Okay? We think we can control it. We are out of tune. We're not working in tandem, in synergy with nature. It moves us not. What's the it? Nature. It doesn't affect us. It doesn't inspire us. I think I've mentioned before, a couple articles have come out in the last year or so that everybody who is stressed, if they would spend 15 minutes a day out around trees, literally, out sitting like in this grove, just 15 minutes a day, their stress levels go down. Heart rate drops, cholesterol, blood pressure, they drop. And if you go for a hike 2 or 3 times a week or a walk in the woods, people's overall general health gets better. Okay? Great God. I'd rather be a pagan suckle than a creed outworn. What's a creed outworn? Belief in Zeus, a pagan, suckled, fed by a religious belief that is no longer held, outworn. So might I, that is, because then I, standing on this pleasant lea, a lea is a little promontory out into the ocean, so that I, looking out into this ocean, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. If I were still suckled by a creed outworn, I could look out into this ocean, and the speaker says, and I would have glimpses that would make me feel less lost. Glimpses of what? Have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. Would he really see Proteus rising from the sea, or hear Triton's horn? What's it predicated on? If I were a pagan suckled in a creed outworn. In other words, if I had a belief system that allowed for this. What's Wordsworth, not the speaker of the poem, whatever that is, whoever that is, what's Wordsworth possibly suggesting? It's an old idea. Okay? Jesus said it, and others did too. As a person thinks, anybody know how the rest goes? So is he. What you think, how you perceive the world, does what? It affects what you think about the world. Here's a common example. You have 2 things coming up. One thing you really dread. Another thing you're really looking forward to. How does your experience of those 2 things, how is it affected by your attitude towards those 2 things? The thing you really dread, you tend to do what? You put off. Like I got papers last week. I haven't looked at them. I've looked at some of them and take them back. I haven't graded any of them. Why? I'm not looking forward to it. Other stuff, doing some kind of yard work, I would rather do. I did that over the weekend, okay? If he were a pagan suckled in a creed outward, he's saying, then I would what? I would see Proteus. And I would hear that horn. What do you hear when you go to the ocean? Well, it kind of depends on the kind of ocean, kind of depends on the weather. If it's very, very calm weather, if there's no moon, etc., so the tides are low, you don't get a lot of crashing waves. If you go off the coast of Oregon, Northern California, and it's a big storm, you hear these thundering waves. That's kind of the implication that he's giving us. Okay? Go from there to she walks in beauty. Yeah, we'll do she walks in beauty. 10:48. George Gordon, Lord Byron, on a quiz or on the exam, final exam, if this poem is included or lines from it are included, you can give either George Gordon, Lord Byron, but don't give George Byron or Lord Gordon, okay? It's George Gordon or Lord Byron, either one. This probably, I was reading something about this, I don't remember when, a year or so ago, maybe last fall. This is written about, and I can't remember her name. A friend of his in Keats, in Wordsworth, in Coleridge. It's not Mary Shelley, but for some reason my mind is telling me that it is Mary Shelley. If I remember correctly, Byron had a brief fling with Shelley's wife. She walks in beauty. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. So, first stanza. What's he comparing her to? Bright daylight? No, the night. Like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. You know, you look up at a night like that, get out away from the lights of the town, and you just see, millions of stars. And all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect, that is, in her face, and her eyes. So it's kind of like she's got these dark eyes that do what? Like a nighttime sky, kind of draw you in. Thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. Because if you're out at night, okay, and it's a very clear sky, and you're away from city light, you have enough light to walk by because of the stars. So she's mellowed to that kind of tender light. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress. What color's her hair? Black, like a raven's. Or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express, how pure, how dear their dwelling place. Notice, the face is the dwelling place of her thoughts. Why? Because what's behind the face? The mind. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace, which waves in every raven tress. Black hair can often do what? Or black can often do what? Like I'm looking at my phone right now, which has a blank screen, and it does have glass on it, but even if it didn't have glass on it, what would it still do with the light from the ceiling? It would reflect it, it would shine. which is kind of interesting when you think about it, because it's still black, and yet at the same time, there's like a light in it. How does that work? That's what his poem's getting at. Just a little bit more darkness or just a little bit more light, it would damage what he's looking at. And on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent. A mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. The speaker is saying, what about her face? There's total peace there. There's total innocence. This mind, we're told, is at peace with all those below. Lower than her? Is she being idolized to some extent? Yes, she's being raised. She's being lifted up. Okay? This person is being described as a goddess. Okay, we'll stop there. And we'll pick up with, we did Dog's Death in one of the video lectures, with the Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night on Wednesday. Read Kubla Khan. Where was Kubla Khan? I might say a couple words about Kubla Khan. All right, have a good day.